Well, Kirk, let's pick up the conversation where we last left off. We're talking about joining a line out or not. As soon as we'd finished analysing it, Auckland got pinged for it.
Yep.
What was your interpretation of that second incident?
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a grey area around when they were infringing by leaving the line out versus not committing to the maul and things like that, and talked to a few people involved in the Super Rugby scene as well, and it's very hard to draw a line, a definitive line around what they can and can't do.
So we're talking about if I'm in the line out and I stand still and don't engage, that's okay, but if I retreat, then I might get in trouble.
Yes, and that's by, if you're deemed to be leaving the line out, then that is where the offence occurs, more so than not committing to the maul. Although there is the other train of thought that in order for being able to effectively go behind the ball carrier to set what would be a maul, that the players on the attacking team are actually going further away than what the defenders are. So it's been one that there's a lot of talk about it, and it's open to interpretation is probably the only thing there around, the defending team deemed to be leaving versus the others who are joining part of that situation. So
you just look like that maybe they're not doing it so often now because of the uncertainty, because you want to know whether you're going to get pinged or not, don't you?
Yes, and it worked very well for them the previous week where the Blues were lucky enough to gain the penalty calls from that, and then it worked against them much to the detriment right at the end of that match, as we know. It's all history now, but critical incidents at particular moments of games, can be season defining, unfortunately.
All right, let's talk about a number of other things that have happened in the couple of weeks since we last spoke. We'll start with the sin and binning of props. Now, obviously it has a major impact to the game. Does it have an impact on your decision as a referee as to whether to sin bin someone, or do you just have to, for instance, a prop that can't stay in the front row? Crockett was popping his crock. So you're going to send someone off for that?
It becomes a bit of an issue that really, if the infringement is that bad, purely from a referee's perspective, it's a lot of player responsibility. So there will be things leading up to that incident, and if the players haven't adjusted their behaviour accordingly in the meantime, I think if it was the first time it happened in a game and a player got yellow carded for an incident like that, then there are question marks potentially, but the referees generally will work with that player through the match, and if they've identified scrum issues, the players will be aware that they're on a warning, at least I would imagine in most cases. It shouldn't affect the decision making. It's whether it's a prop or not, it's kind of more on the team's issue rather than the referee's issue around that. So, but it is in the back of your mind sometimes, particularly if you already knew a prop had been gone off injured earlier in the game, and that potentially it leads to an uncontested scrum situation, but the referees still need to judge on that incident rather than the consequence thereof.
I suppose the angle I'm coming from is that we often talk about scrum safety, and if you get 8 against 7 or 8 against 7 plus a back, there's going to be a disparity, and we're seeing some pretty aggressive driving happening at that place that that must cross our minds as to whether that's the safest avenue.
Yeah, and I think that's an important aspect, that in the lower levels of the game with the domestic safety variations and things, that's always a consideration that teams must match for numbers, but at the top end of the game it's deemed that the players' abilities are able to sustain that, but we do see that that effectively an extra 100 kilos one way or the other can be a massive difference in that situation.
All right, let's take the situation where we have seen penalty tries given now as a consequence of scrums not being able to compete. The law says, as I interpret it, a try would probably have been scored. So, but we're seeing, I think, the scrum may be 5-6 metres out. It's collapsed on the ground. Mm-hmm. What's the probability there of a try being scored?
Yeah, and I guess a lot of it's about that momentum of that team. So if they've got that forward momentum going, and then the only way that momentum stops is by the other team doing something illegal, then they are leaving themselves wide open to a penalty try scenario. It is a bit of a judgment call. A lot of the times, it used to be a sort of a mindset that you'd get away with the first one and the second one it may become, but I think referees have become a lot wiser to that as well now, and are prepared to make that call on the first incident of that happening as well. But really you need to be pretty sure in your own mind that that team had such dominance that they would have got, at least close to the line to effect a decent move to get over the line, or actually have that shove so the number 8 can get over the line off the back of the scrum.
Well, let's stay in the in-goal area for some discussions about offside. When there is offside in in-goal, perception is, of course, you can't be offside in goal, but you absolutely can.
Yep, and it's one of the biggest misconceptions in the game that, particularly in that scenario, when a ruck or a maul goes into in-goal, once the ball's crossed the line, the ruck or the maul doesn't exist in law again. After that, so what happens is players can then enter from anywhere and get on the ball or wrestle for the ball or do what they need to do there. So in that respect, there's no offsides because there's nothing formed. But in a general sense, the offside lines are still there. So the incidents where maybe the first 5 will be standing right back on the dead ball line to make a clearing kick, and all the other 14 players are in front of him in that situation. Often it's the winger who thinks that if he stays at the try line that he can then advance forward because he's in goal, but all the normal laws of the game still apply. So if you're in front of a teammate who last played the ball, you're offside regardless, and you can't advance until you're put onside. Normally that can be done by a player from behind the kicker running through, or the kicker coming through to put that player onside, or the player retreating. But in this instance, generally when it's the kicker is the only player back there, then he's the only one who can run forward and put those players onside, so they can either stay where they are, but they must not advance. They must either retreat or stay as they are.
So the incident we saw in South Africa where a player lost the ball forward. Yep. A fellow teammate came back from a traditionally offside position and made it dead, and a penalty try was given. Yep. Because he was offside still.
Yep, so he was in front of his teammate who last played the ball, and the only action that would have happened otherwise was one of the opposition players would have dived on the ball to score the try. So in that situation, if it happens in midfield, it's just a penalty. And people are reasonably comfortable with that. They know, if you're in front, and often it may happen from a knock-on or something, but people still are aware that if they deny the other team the opportunity to take possession of that ball by being in front, they get penalised. And in goal, it becomes a penalty try based on that, because otherwise the team would have scored the try.
All right, we'll sully the waters a little bit, but you're talking about some of the other laws that don't apply in the in-goal area, and the one is the ability to score a try from outside the field of play.
Yeah, and there's an interesting clip going around online at the moment where it happened in the UK, and what happens is basically if the ball is kicked into the in-goal area and a player is diving for the ball, so as long as they don't take possession of the ball, they can actually dive from and have part of their body outside the field of play or outside the touchline and ground the ball, as long as the ball stays in the in-goal area, and they ground the ball without taking possession, then it's a fair try. It's just one of those wee anomalies, which there is a few around when the ball's in and when the ball's out around the touchline. We've got sort of 68 to 70 metres wide of the field, but there are times when extra space can be utilised.
It is weird because everywhere else, you touching the ball makes it out.
Yep. Indeed, and it's all about, in a lot of cases, where the ball is in relation to the touchline. Some of the scenarios are very clear. If part of you or your body is out and you take possession of the ball, it's clear the ball is out. But if the ball does not cross an imaginary line, like if you imagine a sheet of glass going up from the touchline and the ball stays on the infield side of that, then there are options for players who are standing outside to tap the ball back and prevent it from going out, again, as long as they don't take possession of it. But if that ball has crossed that imaginary line and is outside that line, then your body, your feet or whatever, must stay in the field of play for the entire time that you drag that ball back in.